Hello, and welcome to Season 1, Episode 5 of the Virtual Coffee Podcast. I'm Bekah, and this is a podcast that features members of the Virtual Coffee community. Virtual Coffee is an intimate group of developers at all stages of their coding journey, and they're here on this podcast sharing their stories and what they've learned, and we're here to share it with you. Here with me today is my co-host, Dan.
Thanks, Bekah. Today on this episode, you'll hear from Rahat Chowdhury and Cameron Bardell. Rahat is a second career developer, mental health advocate, a live coding streamer, and a rapper. He is also the founder of a mental health startup called Whimzer, which is aimed at providing tools to help keep up your mental health. Cameron is an iOS developer in the healthcare industry from Waterloo, Ontario. He is also in the final stages of an undergraduate degree in physics and computer science. In this episode, we talk about building mental health projects, balancing mental health with careers and life, and how mental health recovery isn't linear.
We start every episode of the podcast like we start every virtual coffee. We introduce ourselves with our name, where we're from, what we do, and a random check-in question. Today's question is, if you had to choose one song for karaoke, what would it be? Hey, I'm Bekah. I'm a front-end developer from a small town in Ohio, and if I could sing one song for karaoke, it would be No Time Left for You by the Guess Who.
Nice. Hi, I'm Dan. I'm a front-end developer from Cleveland, Ohio. If I could sing any karaoke song, I think anything by Cake is like really my wheelhouse. Both, I like the music and his register kind of matches mine. So I think pretty much anything by Cake, and I would just see what they have and pick one.
Hey, I'm Rahat, software engineer from New York. If I had to pick one song for karaoke, I guess it would be I Don't Want to Miss the Thing, because I am a new dad and I've been obsessed with my daughter for the past month. So yeah.
That's a good one.
That's better than what I got. I'm Cameron. I'm an iOS developer from Waterloo, Ontario. And my go-to karaoke song is Smile by Uncle Cracker.
Nice.
Awesome. Well, thank you both for being here. We're very excited to have you on today to talk about mental health tech. You both have been working on some really cool projects that we're excited to talk about. But before we get there, I always like to do a little bit of the origin story. And so can you talk about that? Maybe Cameron, if you want to talk first and tell us how you got into tech, and then Rahat, that would be awesome.
Sure. Yeah. I was always kind of a techie kid. But I didn't do any real programming until I got to high school. So I think it was in about grade 10 when I took my first, intro to programming course, which was all in Python. And my teacher in that course, who was a really great guy who I still talk to sometimes, he was my computer science and physics teacher in high school. And now I do computer science and physics. So you can see where that came from. He just noticed that I was taking a bit of an extra interest, and he, pulled me aside and said, would you like to find some extra projects to work on? And I said, yeah. So he sent me down to the Center for Extended Learning, I think it was called at our high school. And there I got started with a project building Flash games in ActionScript. Educational,
awesome.
Yeah, RIP Flash. Educational games in ActionScript for students. And that was my first, it was the first thing I ever programmed that anyone else ever looked at. And, I just took it from there.
That's awesome. I always love those stories when you have good teachers who kind of, notice that in you and they're able to cultivate that.
Mm-hmm. That was a big thing of what he does at that school. I think. I mean, he always kind of identifies the kids who will, do a little extra just because they're interested in it, and he tries to take them under his wing, which is super great.
So great. All right, Rahat.
Yeah. So I got into tech a little bit later in life, I guess. So I had built up a career kind of in customer support, and I was managing customer support teams at different tech startups. And I got to work with a lot of the engineers, just seeing different bugs kind of get fixed whenever a customer would complain about things, I guess. And that's what kind of got me interested into the whole thing at first. I wanted to see if I could be the one actually fixing stuff. So my wife is really supportive. She helped me through a lot of things and went to a boot camp. And yeah, now I'm the one fixing stuff.
That is awesome. I love it. And so you both also have different histories with virtual coffee. Cameron, I feel like I've known you forever. I remember you first joining virtual coffee, but I always like to ask too, like, how did you find virtual coffee?
Yeah, I saw someone retweet it. I think it was in June. You guys started in April, right? Then somebody retweeted your invite link in June, and I think I just replied to the tweet asking you if it was public or if it was like kind of a closed thing. And you said, yeah, it's public, come join. So I did, and I've been coming ever since. And it was really, in the midst of the pandemic, I hadn't, talked to anyone that I wasn't directly related to in months. So it was a bit of a savior for me. Definitely one of the best things I did in all of 2020.
Yeah, and now you're growing our iOS or our mobile group of developers because people see and they come for Cameron.
I was only one for a few months, and now I think we're up to 4 or 5.
Yeah.
Watch out, we're what is that? 2% of all the people who attend, but still.
Also a strong member of our Canadian contingent.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of I'm leading some niche groups.
And Rahat, how did you find virtual coffee?
I think I had seen it a couple times on Twitter, and I didn't join it first because I didn't 100% know what it was. And then I think it was Andy from protege.dev told me a little bit about it, and I joined into one of the meetups, I guess, and then from there just really loved the environment and vibe, so kept going.
Yeah, nice. I remember that conversation now because we were talking about working on Epic React.
Yeah.
And we have a channel for that, which is not that active.
Came for Epic React, stayed for everything else.
There you go. It's our new tagline. Okay, so both of you have projects using mental health tech, and I'd love to talk a little bit more about those. So can you just kind of give an overview about the projects that you started?
Yeah, go. So there's two things that I'm mainly working on. One is an open source project. It's called the Siler project. So that is sort of like a database of different mental health resources in the US. What I'm hoping is to kind of like get people to help me add more and more resources to it, either in their own states or cities. So there could be like more stuff for people to look up. The reason I kind of started it is because, taking that step into like trying to find help or find resources that'll help you is like a pretty big one. And I wanted to make it as easy as possible, like once you did make that step to find something that could be helpful for you. So having it all kind of like in one central place would be, probably ideal for that. Yeah. So yeah, I want to turn it into like an API that other developers can like build stuff off of. But for now, it's just kind of a list in the US, hopefully maybe in more countries soon. And the other thing is a startup I'm hoping to launch very, very soon. It's called Windsor, and it's all about cognitive behavioral therapy and kind of like journaling and voice note journaling and kind of like getting reminders of like the good things that happened over time and challenging those negative thoughts and stuff.
That's awesome. I love that. I was working on this postpartum app and I kind of just went into it working on it by myself, but I reached out to a group of moms and I said, like, what would you like to see in something like this? And one of the top responses was resources for my area. And I didn't have anything about that there, but also it was really hard to find that online too. So I certainly think that that's really, really valuable, along with, all of the other things. Anything that can benefit mental health is super important.
Yeah, I think there's like a lot of, I guess, niches in mental health that aren't really covered in some of the general apps. So there's definitely a lot of things that we can do in the space.
I feel like I could talk about it for 7 hours, so try and stay focused here. Cameron, what about your project?
Sure. So my project kind of grew out of my own personal journey with mental health. I was doing lots of research on how people track their mental health over time and how you can do there's various different methods to like track trends in mental health, whether it's like CBT, like Rahat said, or just like doing daily journaling, or and I found that a lot of these clinical studies use these super long surveys that can take up to like half an hour to complete, and you're supposed to do them every day, and that's exhausting, and who has the time for that? And so I dug a little more into that and found that those studies who use those, which certainly have their place, and I'm not saying those should be replaced in any way, but they can often get similar results to these other smaller scale studies that use really simple measurement systems. And the one I found that I really liked was, so it's just really simple. All you do is you rate yourself, your mental well-being, whatever is most important to you, on a scale of 1 to 10, once in the morning and once in the evening. And you do that twice. So you do it kind of for your general overall well-being, and then you pick another thing that's important to you, whether that's your sleep or your anxiety or your nutrition, and you rate that on a scale of 1 to 10 along with your general wellness. So you're basically doing 4 ratings a day, 2 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon. And it's super easy to do. You open the app for 10 seconds a day and do your rating, and then you go about with your day. So I started building an app for that, and I've had to kind of shelve that a little bit because I recently started a new full-time job, hoping to get back to it soon. But yeah, I think a lot of the solutions out there are really intensive and time-consuming, and you're meant to open the app and kind of spend some time in there. But I think the goal for my app would be to spend as little time in it as possible.
Yeah, I like that approach. Some of those you look at, and it's so complicated that it's an automatic, like I'm done. I'm not going to sit here and go through all of these things and watch all of your screens give me messages and positive things. Like I want to go where I want to go.
It feels like you're supposed to live in the app sometimes. Like they have calming videos to watch, and maybe guided meditation, or some of them are like gamified where you can like earn rewards and stuff. And sure, yeah, those work for tons of people, and you get great reviews, and it works a lot. But it doesn't work for me. I want to spend as little time thinking about it as I can. So, and there was no solution out there, so I built it.
It's awesome. I was going to say something about the cognitive therapy. Yeah, Rahat, you had mentioned that with your startup that you're working on. Mm-hmm. That area of like therapy has been very interesting to me, and sometimes it's been successful, but a lot of it with, personally, just in my personal experience, mm-hmm. My problem with it is sort of getting myself to do anything about it. And this sort of applies to what Cameron was saying too, but like the exercises that a therapist would give me would be, these things that I have to both remember to do them. And then also, I don't know, do them the right way or whatever, right. Or maybe there isn't like a right way, but it was like, there's just full of doubt, wondering if I'm doing it the right way or not. So I was wondering if you have some plans, with cognitive therapy, like specifically about, I don't know, about how to approach like sort of things like that.
Yeah. I think in our case, probably cognitive behavioral therapy is probably just kind of in the MVP or the beginning stages. What we're kind of planning to do is like have it be a little bit of a guided sort of prompt thing, but hopefully with not too many prompts, like Cameron mentioned, which is definitely an issue in a lot of apps. So it's kind of like choose your emotion. You can write down something, record something, and be done with that. Or if you want to like get more insight onto things and challenge some of your thoughts, it'll then take you on like guided, like 2 more questions of like, what's a cognitive, like a cognitive behavioral distortion that you're facing right now. Gives you some info about what those are, and asks you to kind of challenge the thought in some way. And that journey I think is more optional, and sort of like if you just want to record yourself, just vent, it's kind of like that's an option too. And if you just want more of that info and more like, I guess, more deeper CBT stuff, then it's a little bit guided, just a couple more questions on that. Our eventual hope is that the app kind of becomes sort of like a custom journey based on like your work with like your therapist or psychiatrist or whoever. We're hoping that like health professionals can like prescribe a journey for the app that's tailored towards the user.
Oh, that's really cool. Interesting. Yeah, that I hadn't really thought about. I mean, they don't always like. There's a lot of apps out there, but not always connected, to like to therapy, right? And it's kind of okay. Right. Therapy is either not doing it for me, or something like that, and people are kind of going on their own to
definitely
onto the app store.
Mm-hmm. I think CBT definitely doesn't work for everybody. So yeah, our goal is just to, like, while we're starting there, we just want to figure out like something easy and simple for people to do that is helpful for them, and just based on stuff that an actual therapist would recommend for them to do on their own time.
Like Rahat said earlier, there's tons of room in the space for like very individual responses. I mean, that's the whole problem with mental health. It's the problem and the solution, I guess, is that it's so varied for an individual, for everyone. So yeah, there's just tons of different ways to build tools like this. And I know part of figuring out how to control your own mental health is you might have to try a lot of these different things, and most of them won't work, and that's really hard and frustrating. But it's part of the journey.
Yeah. And I think, they're all valuable because everybody approaches it a different way. And I think that technology is really changing the face of how we view mental health. I mean, even openness to talking about it and having these conversations. I know, like, in my mental health journey, it would not be nearly as productive as it was if I didn't talk to other people who I never would have met if I weren't on Twitter or online or whatever, So hearing other people's stories kind of guided my journey and where I was going, but it looks different for every person. And the more we learn about it, I think using technology also helps us better identify the problems and the solutions that will work for different people.
Yeah, and the good thing about using technology for that kind of thing is it's impartial. Like, a big part of the reason why I built what I built is that, like, I'm the kind of person who thinks in graphs and numbers, and so I wanted to see like the kind of the true history of what I was feeling. And so I looked when I was doing this research, I found out that there's a lot of studies that show that if you ask people how they're feeling at a certain time, and on a scale of 1 to 10, like I said, like say they get a text and they have to say, how do I feel right now? And you do that multiple times, maybe throughout a day or throughout the week. And then you ask them later on, looking back, how did you feel on average in total? Those two numbers almost never line up. How people say they feel at the moment is not how they say they felt later. So that was another one of the reasons I made this thing that you have to do. Well, you don't have to. You can do it as many times as you want, but ideally twice a day, and you do it right in the moment, really quickly. It's just really important to have that kind of self-knowledge and be able to look back and see things trending up or down in some different directions. Like, my app doesn't offer any kind of therapy or any information other than what you give it. It's just a personal record.
Yeah. That's really cool.
Yeah. Cameron, I wanted to talk about something that you said in Slack the other day too. I think it was somewhere near you is trying to help people feel connected during the time of the pandemic. And I've always, found that community is the most important part of growing through mental health challenges. Can you just talk a little bit about what they were doing there? Because I found it like this really kind of simple but beautiful way of connecting people.
Yeah, that was a really interesting project. So it's called, I go to the University of Waterloo, which is like kind of an engineering and science-based school in Ontario. And so I just saw on Twitter that a couple of engineering students put together this project, and it's basically a heat map of the university campus and where people report that they've cried on campus, which sounds kind of funny, but I think it's really interesting because their stated goal was just to show people, like, when you get into kind of a worked up emotional state like that, I think it's really normal to kind of want to hide yourself. You want to go be alone somewhere, and you kind of experience that on your own. But they just put together this map just to show that if you've done it, if you're struggling with it, then someone else is too. And they've got it's a heat map, like I said, and then there's also just kind of some people did more personalized stories. So I thought that was a really interesting project, especially during a pandemic when we're all more isolated than ever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that idea of connecting people is really important. I think that, you do sometimes get in that moment where you think like, well, I'm the only one that feels this way. But just like having a simple visual of like, oh, I cried, but look, somebody right over there did too.
Yeah, I'm looking at the map right now and I'm like, oh, look, the engineering building. I've had nights there too.
Yeah, I think that's really, really great. Okay, so I would love, you talked a little bit about, how you kind of got into pursuing these. So it sounds like for both of you, there's some type of personal component to this. And I'd love to know, or if you are up for talking a little bit more about like the inspiration behind this, and if you learned anything new about yourself, or, what you were doing through this journey, that would be awesome.
Yeah, I think for me, so the idea for this kind came out of like some of my own personal experiences, going to therapy, just trying to take care of my own mental health and all that. And like one of the main things was like therapy is helpful, but it's only 45 minutes once or twice a month, or every other week or something like that. And there's all this other time in between where just like I'm not sure sometimes, like I guess how to take care of myself, or try to, I guess, make my mental health better in some way. So that was like a large part of the conversation that I was having with my therapist, and she would give me like different prompts and stuff, and like sort of like CBT based things to try out on my own, just writing stuff out, and it was pretty helpful. And the thing that I realized was really helpful for me was like in those moments when I was able to remember back to like a positive thing kind of related to whatever I was doing. Like if like if I was having a crap day at work, but then thinking about another time where, something went right at work, that was sometimes pretty helpful. So that was kind of like a lot of the basis for the app itself, of like having some positive reinforcement in those negative times.
Yeah, that's really cool. I also have trouble with that, the connection between like different appointments and just sort of everything that seems to make sense, when you walk out of an appointment and then a week later you're like, I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't,
Yeah.
like all of that stuff. I think it's a place where like technology can, like really shine, I think, if applied correctly.
Cameron, I don't know if you want to share, you don't have to, but
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah, part of my like journey with my own personal mental health, I guess I started struggling with anxiety in my pretty early teens, and kind of kept it to myself for a long time. And so like I feel like most of the last several years for me has been a process of opening it up to a slowly like wider and wider circle of people. So I started eventually like, talking to my parents, and then they helped me a lot. And then, from there I was like, okay, that worked out pretty well. And then I, started talking to a doctor, and then that helped even more. I was like, wow, this seems to be a trend. I'm noticing the thing. So then, we started opening up to a wider circle of people. Some of my friends, you guys eventually, and now here I am on a podcast talking about it. That's been a really important part of the process for me. We have a Slack channel in Virtual Coffee where we talk about these sorts of things. And, people have been, pretty open, and not everyone has to be open. It's just something that happens to help me personally. I would never say that like, I'm not even, I don't know how to phrase this. Like, I would never tell anyone that they should go and talk about their experiences, because it will definitely help. It might not. It depends. It just happened to help for me. And I only came to that realization after like several years of struggling. So yeah, that's kind of been an ongoing thing for me.
Yeah, that's actually been a trend we've noticed with Virtual Coffee, and not just with mental health, although definitely with mental health, and even just becoming a developer, or learning, finding a job, all of these things that over and over again, we have people that come and just feel alone, or feel like they're the only ones, or feel like something's wrong with them, that because they are struggling finding a job, or struggling learning, learning anything in tech, and or struggling with mental health things, and finding other people that are also going through a lot of the same things.
And I would encourage people to say, like, you don't even have to say anything when you're in these spaces. Like, you can just go and be a lurker until you feel comfortable, or maybe you'll never feel comfortable sharing yourself, but you can go and see what other people are saying. Maybe that's something that could help. That includes like, mental health stuff and the job search. And I know Bekah's been, and several other people in the Slack have been leading the way on like a neurodiversity channel, which has been really great to see. So all those kinds of things. Yeah, you can reach out and find these spaces, and you don't have to be sure if it's right for you to share. You can definitely kind of hang out for a while and take your bearings, and maybe decide that it's not for you, and that's okay too. But yeah, you don't have to feel pressured to say anything.
Yeah, I think a pretty good other benefit that comes from that is like just knowing that you're not alone, sort of. There's other people kind of like going through similar stuff. I think there's definitely just like power in just like not feeling as alone. Um, like for me, especially when I started doing talks on it and kind of like openly talking about it, and saw like other people responding about like, hey, I go through this kind of similar stuff too. It's just like it was kind of maybe not. I don't know if good is the right word to say, but more like just it doesn't feel as bad going through it, knowing that you're not going through it by yourself.
For
And
sure.
it kind of shows how like the progress isn't linear either. Like it's normal and honestly
Yes.
in some ways kind of important to have backslides and then show yourself that you can get through them. If you feel like you've made progress and then you revert back for a little bit, that's a normal part of the process, and you shouldn't. Something that I like to say is you shouldn't feel bad about feeling bad. Like you don't have to beat yourself up over your lack of progress over, in any of these areas. That's just, the recovery, like showing yourself that you have the strength to recover from something like that is really important as well.
Yeah, so my journey into tech started with a trauma that I went through. And so I talk a lot about it, about having anxiety, depression, PTSD. But like one of the most pivotal moments for me was when I was in boot camp. My educational coach who was assigned to me, she said, "Hey, can I share a story with you?" And I said, "Sure." And she said, "I went through trauma too. I was run over by a semi truck." And that was the first person I had ever talked to about trauma. And our traumas were very, very different. But all of the words that she was saying, they were the words that had gone through my head so many times. And I finally realized that I wasn't alone. So I had spent so much time alone in that just moment of connection was enough to like give me hope to keep going. And my trauma was 4 years ago. And I gave a talk about it the other day. I've told this story many, many times. And I just started crying, and I don't ever cry. So I was like on a screen full of people just crying, couldn't get it together. And it was that feeling of like being super frustrated at myself. Like, why is this happening now? In a talk that's recorded, that's going to be on YouTube, right? And so I like wrote a little post on my trauma blog about it. And somebody messaged me and she said, this is what I needed to hear in this moment, because she had also gone through a trauma and a couple of years ago. And suddenly she was like hit with that moment too, and just felt like very frustrated with herself. And so it exactly what you're saying, Cameron, it's like, it's not linear, right? Like there's going to be waves. And somebody once said like, it doesn't go away, but it gets different. And I think that, that might be specific to trauma, but, we find these moments in our lives where we're like, man, I really thought that I was past this. And that can be hard. But when you connect with somebody else and you can kind of talk about it together, then you realize like, okay, like we've got this together.
It can be helpful too if you've been, like you said, you're kind of, you hear your own words in your head so much and maybe you don't know if it makes sense. Because these things can often be really hard to put words to, because it's not something that necessarily has like a physical analogy for everyone. So if you can like kind of say these words out loud and someone says, yeah, no, that makes sense, that makes you feel a little less, lost sometimes.
Yeah. Also, I think, if we're talking technology too, sometimes you can deny things to yourself, right? But if the data is in front of you, like, okay, I've been tracking my mood for this long, for the last however much time. Maybe I'm not being honest with myself about how bad I feel right now. Or good. Maybe you feel good, hopefully.
Yeah, but people aren't good at, it's not that you're not being honest with yourself. People just aren't really that good at self-evaluation. It's not how human brains work. So it's not, it's not necessarily like intentional or otherwise like deluding yourself or lying to yourself or whatever you want to call it. It's just not an easy, normal thing to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that kind of circles back to some of the cognitive, behavioral therapy stuff. Is your brain like will actually actively lie to you about a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
It is. Yeah. Well, like we said at the beginning, we could probably all talk about this for a long, long, long time. Kind of moving on. So you're both pretty busy. You have a lot of side projects going on, and along with career stuff and family stuff, school. So we were wondering how each of you sort of balance your own mental health, like with work and with side projects and everything else that goes along with being a human in in 2021. Rahat, we'll start with you. You had a talk. One of our landing talks last year was sort of about some of this. So we'll start with you and see what your thoughts were.
Yeah, for me, I tend to forget a lot of times to really stop and just like not work on all the different things I'm working on for a little bit. So the way I've recently been managing it is just like trying to remember that, I have a daughter now. Need some time for her, need some time for myself, need some time to just like unwind from everything because there is a ton of stuff I'm doing right now. And it takes a lot of work for me to like get past my own I guess self-imposed deadlines on things that don't actually mean anything. And the way I had sort of tried to like something a little exercise I do just in my head is like pretend that like I'm a stakeholder in a meeting and I'm like pushing this date back a little bit, like, hey, we don't need it till this time. Just kind of that's something that kind of works for me a little bit. And then those moments I'll try to like go and like just take a walk or play some video games, anything like that, and just try to get away from what I'm working on. And just like also trying to remind myself that if I want to work quickly through things, then I need to take a break because I've like gone through burnout before of like not being able to do something for a couple months. And just kind of like keeping that in my head of like, if I don't stop sometimes and just like take a breath, I won't be able to continue doing as much of the stuff as I hope to do.
Yeah, totally. I think that's, I mean, we've sort of talked about this before, but I think that that's like a great thing to do is consciously is sort of try to not jam those breaks into your schedule, but like actually schedule, breaks in and make sure you're taking care of them. Cameron, do you have anything like, I don't know, specific that you do to try to, take care of yourself while getting everything done and, side projects?
Nothing specific, I guess. I'm coming out of a bit of a period where I've like been bouncing around on a lot of different things because about a year ago, for a long time, I was kind of torn between whether I would do like science and research or just go into tech. And about a year ago, I finally decided, okay, tech's going to be the thing. So at that point, I started doing like a bunch more freelancing. I did a couple internships and side projects and stuff because I was like, okay, here's what I need to do to get into the tech industry. And then, like a couple weeks ago, I just got hired full time. So then that period of like doing a whole bunch of stuff and bouncing around is kind of settling down now. So I'm back into like reevaluating and focusing on, okay, here's the main things I need to do. Like I need to do like this much. Well, I need to work, 40 hours a week, and I need to do this much school, and I also need to exercise. So I've been, coming out of kind of a chaotic period and settling into more of a routine the past few weeks, which has been really nice. Yeah, but I still think that period of working hard was important because I ended up, in a place that I really wanted to get, and it was hard for a while, but here I am.
I think too, when you can see this isn't a forever thing, this is going to end, then it makes it feel a little bit more doable. But there's also this like natural tendency in tech. I think tech just moves so quickly, right? That people feel this need to hustle all the time, and that's like, I can't stand that word hustle. But like to continue to keep doing stuff all the time. And I find that as much as I don't like that word, I have a really hard time turning off my brain when there's always something to be done because, like tech moves fast and so do people. So
yeah, I really kind of like, I don't know, it's kind of a strong word, but I kind of detest that part of Twitter. That's like, I don't know, Silicon Valley, like VC hustle porn, kind of like if you're not working, you're losing money. I don't know, everyone should be a founder kind of thing, which is not true. Not everyone should be a founder. Being a founder kind of sucks.
It does.
Yeah. And I don't know. I just what you said about having a deadline was it really stood out to me because so when I made the decision to go into tech, I had a year and a half left in my degree. And I was like, okay, so I'm going to work really hard for this next year and a half. And then, I'm going to be settled into a career, hopefully. And having that deadline really helped. And then when I got hired full time, I had 4 months left in my undergrad degree. So just to make the full time work, I stretched that out into 8 months. So starting in August, I'll be done with school and just working. And then I feel like then like I said, even now I'm working less hard than I was 3 or 4 months ago. But even past this summer, I'll be pretty fully settled, and just having that in mind really helps.
Yeah. And I know, Rahat, too, you have been working on a book, and at some point you tweeted that you were talking about like building in mental health breaks, which I just really loved that idea, because we're always focusing on like, you've got to learn fast. Boot camps are moving people through quickly. Everybody's looking for jobs. And that idea of like, okay, you can learn, but let's pause and take care of you. And I just found that concept really, really fascinating. Did it make a place, and does it have a place? Oh my gosh. I can't do it.
Is that in your book?
Yep, that's what I was going for.
So I've definitely built it into the chapters I've been writing recently. Like at the end, depending on like what subject I cover in that specific chapter, like there's one where talking about like trying to find other people similar, like in the same journey as you, going into tech, and seeing like, if you can band together to work on some stuff. And at the end, I kind of like, I want to have like a sort of like kind of like an alert box type thing at the end of like, hey, reaching out to people can be hard. Talking to people is pretty hard, especially if you're like me, have some social anxiety and stuff. And, if you've talked to a couple of people, great. You don't have to keep doing it. Take a break. Just remember to take care of yourself, stuff like that. And that there's little like alerts like at the end of each chapter like that, based on whatever we covered, of just like, it's awesome that you're doing this, but you should also be taking care of yourself as well.
That's really cool.
Mm-hmm. Another thing that Bekah said, sorry, just to jump in quick, Bekah said something that stood out to me, I guess, is that like these boot camps and different online learning platforms, whether it's Udemy or like something self-directed like that, they kind of try to push you through, like you said, and finish quickly. And that's they present it in a way as if that's good for you, and it's not. It's good for them. Then they can get more people in and charge more people more money. So yeah, they want to present that in a way that makes it seem like it's for you, but it's not.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. And the boot camps, from what I've heard, it seems like they're either in a like kind of class like that where people are pushing, or it's either that or you're in the self-guided path. And it, from what I've heard, and I don't have full experience with this, but from what I've heard, it's sort of like very much on your own at that point, and so you can try to go faster, or you go slower, or you're lost or whatever, but you're just sort of like drifting off on your own. I think, getting some of that thought into the learning materials and learning, courses and programs. It seems very important. It's a lot of people struggling in boot camps, from what I've learned over the last year.
I think that's definitely like a culture in a lot of boot camps that needs to change, because we're just kind of pushing and not reminding people to just take a break. Like I also I'm a TA at a boot camp part-time, and like one of my students was asking me like, how do I get better at JavaScript? How do I like do more stuff to keep building? I try to work on things every single day for X amount of hours, and I'm just like, take a break sometimes and just let the information kind of sink in, because sometimes you just need to walk away from it to like let yourself absorb it. Sometimes just like walking away is like one of the best things you can do to like solve a problem. Like there's countless times, and I think a lot of people have talked about it, of like, you're going through trying to fix a bug, you don't know what's going on, you walk away, you come back, and you know what's going on now, because you need a refresher. You need to just like step away sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah, motivation is like a finite resource.
Yeah. I feel like that the go take a walk is got to be like when people are having a, when people are like, I can't figure this thing out, it's like when you're doing tech support, your first question is, well, did you turn it off and turn it back on again? Right. And so when you're doing like bug support, you're like, okay, did you take a walk? Have you stepped away from the computer yet? Step away from the computer and come back. And then let's see if you're still having the same problem.
It's so hard too, I think, in boot camps. There's that sense of loneliness and lack of community, especially for online boot camps with self-paced students that don't prioritize community. And then you find that problem. So you can take a walk and come back and have nobody to ask, right? And so it's like boot camps come with built-in loneliness. Like, I don't know, that needs to be advertised or something.
Yeah, that's Meg in our Slack and VC. Meg was talking about that a lot, how she's doing the self-guided boot camp, and she can't do it as fast as some of her peers because she's working at the same time. So she's kind of fell behind like the people she started with just for lack of time, and then I think that contributed to some of her dissatisfaction.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, she's one of the people I was thinking about. And Marie was, she was on the podcast a couple episodes ago, but was talking about, she did the scheduled one, right? Mm-hmm. But they didn't have a lot of support and she was struggling. And so she basically strong-armed her whole class into doing study groups. And they all found it, they all found it very valuable, but it was not a program thing. It was Marie doing it because she wanted the sport, and it turned out other people, found it valuable too.
Yeah, it's the same way I passed undergrad, just having groups of people to study with. And then, that went away for a lot of people in the pandemic, and I can't imagine what it would have been like as a first year going into that. And, the only way I passed, second year calculus was because I was doing it with a group of friends. So yeah, I did definitely feel bad for those people.
I was talking to a mom recently, and I don't remember if she's going through a boot camp or a self-taught. She's doing like a guided. I can't talk today. Can't remember if she is self-taught or doing a boot camp. But one of the things she was saying was it's just so hard to find time. A lot of moms are at home with kids right now because of the pandemic and there's not childcare. And so she was saying, I guide my students through their schoolwork all day. And then I stay up from 12:30 until 3:30. And then I've got to get up at 7, and it's like, okay, let's break this down a little bit and figure out something that's doable and maintainable and that allows you to get rest, because a rested brain is going to absorb the material more. But, there's this pressure to continue to go all the time despite everything else. And I don't know, you can't really strong arm your way through. Well, I was going to say through lack of sleep, but parenthood kind of makes you do that. So maybe you can.
Parenthood also, confirms that it's not a good idea by the end of by the end, though. The choices you're making after 4 weeks of not sleeping, you can
trust you guys on that one.
Yeah. It's good stuff, though.
So I've been doing a deep dive into deep learning and mental health. And I've been very, very fascinated by all of the different ways that they are approaching mental health with technology, and how I think that's going to provide more individualistic care for people, and address I think, really understanding what mental health looks like. And so I think that that's really exciting. But I also feel there's this tendency, I'm so excited about this thing, but you're going to have to wait forever for it to come out and to apply it to your own life. But I think that, all of these little things that bring us hope can be really useful. I don't know if there's anything that you found that you're yes, this is really helpful, whether it's for you or someone or for your projects in terms of tech and mental health, but I'd love to hear about it.
I don't have anything, anything like deep learning or AI or anything like that. I did take some of my own trend data and kind of feed it into a prediction engine and a classification engine just to see if I could find anything. I didn't find anything that useful, mostly because my data is pretty one-dimensional. But yeah, nothing that I've used personally comes right to mind. But like you said, we're kind of using our own experiences to look ahead at these things. And you said, well, maybe it'll take a long time for these to come out and be available to use ourselves, or we could use our experiences to build them for the next group of people, and then they can improve upon what we build. I think that's kind of the dream of the tech industry, is that things keep improving. So hopefully we see how it goes.
Yeah, the deep learning stuff is cool. We are actually, like, one component of our app is like the whole reminder of something relevant to what you're going through right now, and we're building this with like AWS Amplify, which gives us access to a couple cool like machine learning stuff that they have kind of built in, and right now we're kind of like trying to figure out the best way to kind of compare one entry that you're not having a good day on to something that's like relevant, but you did have a good day on, to remind you of stuff. So while we're kind of like using that, I guess API for now, what we kind of want to do eventually is probably build something of our own based on like what our users are actually going through. So we have someone on board who's kind of like leading that a little bit, and I think there's a lot of room to do some cool stuff with deep learning and mental health.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I know I keep coming back to the cognitive therapy stuff, but like adding that little aspect into it, and you're saying, for example, you're really upset because you feel like you can't do a thing or something, and then the app can be like, well, here's proof that you have done a similar thing, like 6 times in the past, like since we've started, working together or something like that. That could be really, I don't know, really valuable.
Yeah, definitely.
I always, like after I finally felt like I was, had my trauma under control, I always would talk to people about this idea of like having this experience in your back pocket. Like, look, I was able to make it through this, and it was really challenging for a period of time, but I've developed these tools, or like I know that I need community, or I know that this is going to be a trigger for me to predict some of those things. But at the beginning of the pandemic, I found myself, again, frustrated with myself because I thought, so much of what I feel like I'm going through, like I lost my job, my kids were at home, and I was supervising their schooling, and I just felt like really isolated and alone. I'm like, I have navigated through this before, but I'm crying every single night. Like, why can't I make it through this? And like, ultimately, what I remembered was, hey, community plays a really big role in that, right? And so that's how virtual coffee was started, because I was like, hey, anyone want to get together? Because I feel really lonely. But then also recognizing that I wasn't the only one going through the experience of the pandemic and the effects of it. Like, everybody was experiencing it. And that's very different from navigating your own situation. And so, I think for me, at least, I have this tendency to like be really frustrated with myself when I think like I should have the skills or the tools or whatever to make it through this. But also, not every experience is the same, and that's going to vary from time to time. So there's learning new things, and there's growing as a person. And I think that being able to share those things, and the first couple virtual coffees, that's what they were. It was like, I'm frustrated there's a pandemic, and I'm very sad about it right now. But that's what creates that like closeness and that ability for vulnerability, and for other people to be able to share their stories as well.
Word.
Sorry, I feel like I did a monologue. We can cut that.
No, don't cut that.
Yeah, that was awesome.
No, I think it was great. I just didn't have anything really to add to it.
I have nothing to add.
Okay, so wrapping up, I guess just a last question that is a little more general. We in Virtual Coffee talk a lot about finding teams and finding jobs and stuff like that. So when you're thinking about either joining a company or creating a team to work on a project, what is like a characteristic? What just like pick one, but what is one characteristic that you value in people in people you work with? We'll start with Rahat.
Yeah, I mean, I've been recently applying for jobs and stuff. So one thing I've been kind of like asking a lot about is like how the culture is in terms of like pair programming. I love like learning things from like more experienced devs. So if there's like a environment for that, that's definitely something super important to me. I've had a couple companies tell me straight up that, yeah, we don't really have time for that. Like, well, probably don't want to continue with you then.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I feel like that kind of like shows you a little bit about how, senior devs kind of like support the more junior ones. And I guess the overall team dynamic of like having that willingness to just like hop on a call or something with somebody and help them through a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. I found with pair programming too, it's sometimes it's a top-down issue, right? So like you could have a senior developer be willing willing to talk and willing to do stuff like that. But when you phrase it as like pair programming, then management gets jumpy because two people are like in their mind, two people are working on the same problem or whatever. So I think that's really important to think about when you're finding people to work with. Cameron, what about you?
Yeah, that was a good one. One thing I noticed when I was doing a bunch of interviewing, I interviewed at a lot of places, even some like that I was pretty sure I wouldn't take the job, just to kind of find out what the tech industry was like, because I didn't really know. And one thing I noticed was that kind of stood out to me was some places don't ever talk about like the product they're building in an interview. I can't really tell if they care about what they're building or if they want to make it good. And yeah, I just really wanted to build something where like everybody wanted to actually make it good. Even if it was something that would just be an internal tool, or something that's in kind of like a boring industry. Like I still want to make something that's nice to use and looks good and supports accessibility and all these things. Yeah, I was definitely more willing to talk to people who seem to care and know a lot about the product and want to continually improve it instead of just, I don't know, make it good enough.
Yeah, I think that's great. I feel like that's usually a good sign that like the people are invested in it too, and you don't have a lot of turnover. If you have a new people that are coming and going all the time, then you can't like build any connection to it, right? So
yeah, it kind of surprised me especially a lot of the startups I was working at. I thought they would all like deeply care about like the thing they were building, but I don't know, they didn't.
They deeply cared about
they deeply cared about the money they were making. Yeah,
right.
Awesome. Thanks for being here. We really enjoyed having this conversation. But before we leave, can you let us know if there's anything you're up to or how our listeners can find you?
Sure. Yeah, you can find me at Virtual Coffee, obviously, twice a week. And you can find me on Twitter at Cameron Bardell, and that's where you can see me doing most of my stuff. I don't have a lot of time for doing like open source work right now, but I hope to get started back up in the next few months. So yeah.
Yeah. You can also find me on Virtual Coffee. I usually come to the afternoon meetings. And I'm on Twitter at Rahat Codes. And if you're into open source and stuff, definitely looking for more contributors to my mental health project. So definitely check that out.
Awesome.
That's awesome. We'll obviously link all of that in the show notes. Okay, well, thank you both for joining us. And we will catch up with you guys on Virtual Coffee.
Yeah, thanks, guys. It's always great to talk about this stuff.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Virtual Coffee Podcast. This episode was produced by Dan Ott and Bekah Weigel and edited by Dan Ott. If you have questions or comments, you can hit us up on Twitter at virtualcoffee.io, or you can email us at podcast@virtualcoffee.io. You can find the show notes, plus you can sign up for our newsletter to find out what Virtual Coffee's been up to on our website at virtualcoffee.io.
Please subscribe to our podcast and write a review. Next week, we'll have Drew Clements on the podcast to talk about building a career and a community. Thanks for listening, everyone.